We have the address book, and just like our other projects, we have an index.html, addressbook.css, addressbook.js. So I'm going to open this guy up, open this in Chrome. So we have this form on the left and a display area on the right, and some operation buttons at the top to do a number of functions. So there's a display button to display if there's an address book that already exists in memory. There's a delete to delete the address book. There isn't one right now, so deleting doesn't do anything. There's a button to download the address book if one exists in memory, so it'll download it to a file, and I'll talk about that. And then if we have a file and we want to upload it into the address book, we can upload it. Okay, so I'm just going to add a contact here. Do I have a little thing here? No. So I'm just going to fill this out real quickly. And so a couple of the things with this project that we're going to tackle, we're going to kind of introduce object-oriented programming. We are going to tackle error checking, both in HTML and in JavaScript. And we're going to talk about regular expressions. So all sorts of superpowers, all sorts of things that if you go, programming's too hard, I want out, that all of these things will hopefully pay you dividends, even if you call it quits on computer science. So anyway, I'm just going to kind of fill this out. I do have to type these all out. I can't just enter gibberish here because I have error checking set up. Okay, and you can note this by the fields turn red if I enter incorrect information. Okay, so that's built into HTML. I have some code in there to check vaguely if I have correctly formatted stuff entered in. Okay, so that's a correct phone number. Okay, and I do have to enter a photo or it won't let me enter it, so we'll do another crazy photo. We want just one of these. Okay, and we'll click add. I have a little pop-up for no good reason, and I should be able to hit display, and this is what it looks like. And this should be, I should have some CSS on this. Must have not have done that. But then, so the address book prints off to the right, and so I have the image and then all the information. Okay, and it just if I add another one, it'll be added into the address book in succession. Okay, so so now I'm going to hit the download button, and you'll see that it loaded this address book.json file. Okay, so I'm going to just open this up. And this is what a JSON file looks like, and it stands for JavaScript Object Notation. And this is a JavaScript object. So if we're creating a JavaScript object in our JavaScript code, this is what it looks like. And other languages, because JavaScript is so popular, this has become kind of the standard format for transmitting complex information between different languages now. So learning JavaScript is important, if for no other reason that this makes a lot more sense then. So JSON is kind of the standard format for everything now. So this, the whole curly brace thing, brackets, colons, and commas, that's sort of the syntax for it, and it'll look a little clearer in the actual JavaScript code. This thing here, this is a base 64 encoded JPEG. So if we convert an image into text, we can base 64 encode it, and we can just send it as text. So that's our JSON file. So now I'm going to go back to my browser. I'm going to hit delete, and I'll hit let's just refresh here. Get rid of that image. Hit display to make sure it's gone, and now I'm going to hit upload. Should open up my file selector, and I'll go to my downloads, and I'm going to upload that file that I just had, and it uploaded it. Okay, so Might not seem that impressive, but there's a lot of stuff that happens under the hood there. Okay, so in addition to the JSON export that we're using something called uh, local storage. Okay, so we're storing things. You guys have all heard of cookies? So you can think of the browser local storage as like a super cookie. It's it works fundamentally like a cookie, but you can store a lot more stuff. Okay, so we're kind of using that as our database. So it can persist. It can persist between sessions and so forth. So, and in fact, we can probably look at it in here. So, application, yeah, local storage. So if I look at local storage, yep. So in local storage, you can look at it in the console here, and so it shows what's in the local storage. And I'm calling that perm contacts in this case, permanent contacts. Okay. And so this is still in that like JavaScript object notation, right? So it's an array. This is the 0, the first element of an array. And I'll touch on that too. Okay. So, any questions? If I say anything or if I go too quickly or gloss over anything, call me out on it. Okay. So I'm gonna. If I don't see questions, I tend to keep going. So, just stop me if I do. All right. So, let's see. Where should we take this next? The idea of constructing this address book, kind of from the ground up, is if we think about this in terms of object-oriented programming, which is just a method of representing the real world in code. So we'll have, in the case of how I constructed it, we have an address book as an object in code, and we have a contact. Okay, so the contact, like this is a contact, has a number of fields. Okay, and in object-oriented programming, sometimes those are referred to as properties. Variables. Okay, so if an object has variables, they're oftentimes called properties. And objects will oftentimes have functions associated with them. So we have functions that we've used in JavaScript so far. If we include the functions with our object, those are called methods. And so we'll have functions that can do things with the object itself. So in the case of the contact, I have a method that prints out the contact itself. Okay. So that's the main method that it has. This isn't a very sophisticated program, so it can each contact can print itself. The address book has more functions. It has a display, a delete, a download and upload, some other things. Okay, so let's kind of dig into this from the ground up in the hello world. Okay, so. Yeah, let's just kind of do that. Actually, I want to show one quick thing. So, W3 schools. Yeah. So, So this is actually going to be a really good explanation of objects in JavaScript. Again, you could go top to bottom through these the little tutorials that they have on W3 Schools. I highly recommend that. Their stuff is really solid. So if we're representing a car, this is the syntax for representing something like that. So we'd have car.name equal, and if you were doing this actually in JavaScript, you'd put this in quotes. It'd be a string, right? Car.model equals, probably in quotes, 500. Car.weight. So you use this dot syntax. And we have methods. These are the functions. So with a car, you start, you drive, you brake, you stop, I guess. And when we have an object, this is what an object looks like. Okay, so a very simple object in JavaScript looks like this. Okay, an object is just a variable like anything else, and you can create an object on the fly. This is an object literal. Okay, so you can just create objects at any time. In other languages, you can't necessarily do that. But in JavaScript, you can just create an object. You don't have to define the object and then use it like we do with functions. We can just create it on the fly. We can create functions on the fly in JavaScript. We can create variables on the fly in JavaScript and just use it right here. Okay. So let's see. They talk about the methods. Yes. Okay. So if we have a method, we can do something like this. Okay. Full name, function. Okay. Now we're going to use some slightly different syntax for this. Okay. And that is because there are a couple things. JSLint does not want you using the this keyword, partly because the this keyword in JavaScript can sometimes be ambiguous. Okay. So you should understand that this exists if you ever see other JavaScript code, but you should generally avoid that, and you can if you follow the syntax that we're going to use. Okay, but in general, like this is an object in JavaScript, and this is what represents JSON. This is JSON right here, JavaScript object notation. So if you create a text file and it has this format, that's a JSON file. Okay. All right, so with that in mind, let's adapt our hello world and just start hacking away and create that the start of the address book. Okay. So I'm going to I'm going to rename this one. So all right, so I'm going to call this address book, and we can get rid of these images. And I'm going to call this address book. I'm going to call this address book, and we're going to start on, I'm going to actually quit out of this. Is it yelling at me about anything? Don't save. Okay. So I'm just going to open this up in Atom. And just like we did for the travel calculator, I'm just going to kind of go through here and clean these things up real quick. I'll just do a quick search and replace on this. Oops. Okay, and we'll save that. And we will just get rid of this. And we don't need that. We don't need this. We probably don't need this. Probably don't need this or this. Or this. I'm not sure about the colors and whatnot yet either. So, and we're going to call this travel calculator, not travel calculator, address book. Small brain. All right. And then hello world, replace, oh, there's just one. Okay. And can just get rid of most of this stuff. Let's see, just get rid of these. And this. And probably all this. Okay, so now we can just have kind of an empty shell of a program. So I'm going to just save this. This is address book. Why did I do that? All right. Okay, so close this out and save this. All right. So now we're going to create our objects the way that the guy that wrote JSLint sort of recommends that we create them, and that is kind of follows more the style of Java, and so it should kind of set you up in a way that will be more comfortable for you if you use Java more. So the rest of the stuff you do here, GB, most of it's going to be based on Java. So this is going to maybe seem a little more cumbersome than what we just looked at, but it's going to be more similar to Java. Okay, so so we're going to do that by creating some functions, and the functions are going to return an object. Okay, so the return value of our functions are going to be objects. Okay, which is going to seem a little crazy, but you'll see why that's going to be helpful. Okay, so we're going to create two functions, one called contact, and I'm just going to have empty parameters right now, and I'm going to return my. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then I'm just going to have a contact, and then we're going to have address book will be the next one. Okay. Anybody confused? Nobody's confused? Okay. I'm highly suspicious if nobody's confused. All right. I'd be confused. All right. You guys are smarter than me. That's good. All right. So, so we're going to have an array of contacts. Anybody know what an array is? What's that? What's a matrix? Yeah, that's a good representation. Typically, an array is just a one-dimensional array. Is what gets used the most, and it's a list. It's like a list of data. Yeah. So that's the better way to think, like the easier way to think about it. And you could have multiple dimension arrays, which would be kind of like a matrix. But to start out with, we have one-dimensional arrays, and so the syntax for accessing an array is going to look something like, I'll put it right in this. So we're going to have an array. So we're going to have contacts. We're going to have a variable. And it's going to be an array. So we use these square brackets. Okay. So that just means it's an empty array. Okay. And so a couple things here. This is kind of a really loaded statement here. Okay. So we're just initializing this as an empty array. So it's the square brackets, not the curly braces. So you get your terminology down to communicate effectively. I'm using this syntax. Now again, JavaScript kind of doesn't care. Okay, so we have a couple conventions that we're following here. Okay, because programming languages like Java want you to have your object classes named with a capital letter. We're gonna do that here. Okay, so this is, you can consider this to be like our class used in Java ideology. So we're gonna use a capital letter here. We're gonna start it off with a capital letter. And here I'm kind of using camel case here, right? But then we have this underscore here. Okay. And the underscore here is just used to signify that this is a private variable. And in this program, it doesn't much matter. And in JavaScript, there's really no such thing as private variables. The idea of object-oriented programming is to model the real world, but also to encapsulate your programs, to protect your data from the rest of the program. So if we have variables in contacts, like if we have var name, we might not want address book to just be able to just change this and set it to any old value. We might want to have contacts control the rules by which name gets changed. Okay, so we set up some accessor functions in contact to control that. And similarly in address book, we could do that too. Now there is nothing above address book, so this kind of doesn't matter, but we're just going to kind of go through the motions and do this anyway. Okay, so we're going to have extra code in here that really serves no purpose. And by the way, you could access this anyway in JavaScript because there are no private variables. You could access these anyway, but it is what it is. Okay, so let's kind of just fill this out. So let's I'm going to jump back into the contact here. So so we're going to have the name, and we're going to have the we're returning my, so we have to create a variable my. And my, again, is going to be an object. So that uses curly braces. Okay. And we were all wondering, like, what do we do about this 80 character limit deal, right? So this is a circumstance, if we put everything on one line, it would definitely go beyond 80 characters. Okay. So here we are going to list all of our properties that we want to access in contact. Okay, so name is going to be one. Okay, so we just go name, and the property is going to be equal to name underscore name. Okay, so it's this private variable name. And then we're going to set up an accessor variable, or an accessor function, to actually handle that. Okay, so so we want to have var name equals function value. And then we should have some error checking here. To see if this is a valid name. But otherwise, we're going to say if value is not equal to nothing, then underscore name is equal to value. Otherwise, we're going to return underscore name. Okay. So this is we're going to have it. This is kind of a getter setter function all in one. Okay. So in Java, C++, programming languages like that, we'll set up a method to be able to operate on these member property variables. Okay, so a lot of stuff going on here. Okay, and because this is we're setting this equal to a variable, this is a statement, so I have to actually put a semicolon there. Okay, so that's a little weird syntax too. Okay, so this is our object. This is our class object that we're creating. Okay. I don't think I made any mistakes there. Maybe I did, but we'll see soon enough. Okay. And then let's kind of finish out our contacts here. So we're going to do the same kind of thing here. We're going to have var my equals this. Make sure I add a semicolon there. And I'm going to say contacts is contacts. This does not get a semicolon. And if we have multiple of these, so if we had another item in here besides contacts, we would comma separate it. Okay? But we don't. So not yet anyway. And then we have our contacts equals function value. And I'm actually just going to copy and paste this. Okay, and this one we probably do want to check to make sure it's actually an array, and we might have to do something else other than set the value and everything, but let's just pretend that's all good for now. Okay. So it just kind of looks like that. Now these aren't really associated yet because we're not actually calling either of these. These aren't doing anything. Okay. So if we wanted to actually have this do something, we'd have to we'd have to actually call address book and we have to actually have some code in here to do something. Okay, so this is a function, so you can think about this as being a class, but also you can have some constructor code, some code that runs initially in here, and I won't burden you with that yet. We can probably get to that next week. So in address book, what we would be doing is we would, when we enter on the form, we're going to, one at a time, we're going to add a contact. We're going to check to see if it's a valid contact, and we're going to append it to the end of the contacts array. Okay, so we're going to create a new contact, and we're going to add it to the end of the array. Okay, anybody lost? Did I lose anybody? Yes? Everybody's following along perfectly? That's amazing. I feel like I'm doing a terrible job explaining this. Okay. Okay, so that is, I think that's pretty good for now for the JavaScript. So let's just call that kind of good. I don't want to get too in the weeds. And there is going to be some chunks of code that I'm going to give you, so I don't want to go too far down and not be able to backtrack on things. Okay. So so now let's look at some of the validation things that we can do in the web browser itself. Okay. So let's see. Looking in the wrong thing here. So one thing that we can do that is relatively new in terms of HTML is we can have different input types. Okay, so so in the travel calculator, we mostly dealt with numbers, but we can have text, and text is usually the default. We can have numbers. We can have all these different types of input. Okay, number, month, image, hidden, which is an interesting thing. File, we're going to use a bunch of these. Email, what? That's weird. Okay. Date, checkbox, button you could use, reset you could use. So in this project you could use a whole bunch of these. TEL for telephone you could use, and they all have so these are These can offer the capability of, especially on mobile devices, of changing the keyboard so that it'll be a better adapted keyboard for entering the type of data needed. So, for instance, email can have a text entry keyboard, but it can have a .com key, and it can have an @ key, and it can hide some of the characters that aren't even legal in an email address. A telephone can just have the number keypad. A URL can do some error checking as well to make sure that you enter the HTTP, or if you don't, maybe it adds it automatically, whatever. So these things could be done by the web browser or not. So whenever these things are available for the type of data that you're using, you should use them. It doesn't hurt. So if a web browser, all web browsers support these now, but for a while, like in the olden days, if there was a web browser that didn't support any of these, it would default back to text. Okay, so if you had input type equals weak, it would default to text anyway. Okay, so it doesn't hurt anything to use these. So that is one thing that you should definitely do, is utilize these. Okay, so then it should be under attributes here. We did talk about the min and max attributes for the numeric input, but now we're going to deal with the pattern attribute, and this allows some error checking right in the browser, and that's how I got the red and green to show up on my form field like this. So it's blue by default. It's blue when I'm entering, it's blank when there's nothing. It's blue when it's highlighted. I enter something wrong, it's red. If I enter a valid email address, it turns green. Okay, so I'm handling that with this and some CSS. So there's no JavaScript involved. Okay, so which is pretty cool for people that are scared of code. So and the way that we're doing that is with this magic right here, pattern. Okay. So pattern uses what is called regular expressions. Has anybody ever used regular expressions before? So you may not believe me now, unless you learned some shortcut keys in this class. This is the most important thing that you'll learn, is regular expressions. They are a superpower. Regular expressions are they're kind of a language into themselves. So they're a syntax that is used to represent patterns for matching a string of characters. Okay, so you can use them in a lot of word processors. You can definitely use them in Atom. You can use them in a lot of other text editors as well. You can use them in a lot of spreadsheets. You can use them in many programming languages, Java and JavaScript and Python and PHP. So anyway, so we specify them using kind of this syntax. Okay. So usually it has a slash, kind of holding the regular expression in it. Okay. So they kind of explain this right here. Okay. So the part inside the slashes is the pattern, and the I at the end is a modifier. Okay. So in this case, it says what's in here, match it, but it can be case insensitive. So the I at the end means case insensitive. So this regular expression will match W3 schools, but also W3 schools all in caps, W3 schools with mixed capitalization. Okay, so that's actually a pretty complex regular expression, but very simply put in there. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so let's just try a few here. Okay, so and this is where W3 schools is super awesome. Okay, so here we have a string here, And so this is in JavaScript. JavaScript supports regular expressions, but we can use these regular expressions, and we can put these just in as a pattern in our HTML, and it'll match. Okay. So let's. I'll actually just highlight one of these, and so let's get a simple one first. Let's do the name. So I have my regular expression here, okay? So I'll just paste this in here. Okay, and then I'm gonna just put okay. So if I run this, this should work actually. Why is this not working? Let's try it without this. So let's try it on this site instead. So we have an actual regular expression site we can test things on. regexr.com, not that one. There we go. Okay, so actually this is for building regular expressions. You should probably use this. So this gives you a cheat sheet that explains the language. Okay, so we can build things up. So we can put what we want to match here. Okay, so I have like that sample text that I had Steve Jobs in there. Okay, so I could in my item here, I could match just literally Steve Jobs. So I could type that and put that in there. That would match. But if I put another name in there, it wouldn't match. Okay, so I could, you know, if I should just, so if I had another test name here, you know, Eric Schmidt, it wouldn't match, right? So we need to change this. Okay, so if we look over here, I could say match anything. So that would work. So we can do match anything followed by a star. Okay. So this gives us a warning because anything followed by a star can match anything including empty. So this is probably not what we want, right? So we're not going to do that. So what we actually want is any word. Okay. So this is a word character. So I'm going to go \W. Okay, and we want to start from the beginning of this text. So that's the caret, okay? So the caret right here starts at the beginning of the string, okay? So I'm starting at the beginning of the string, and it matches the E there. And so I want to match at least one of those, okay? And so I don't want to match unlimited, which would be the star. I want to match at least one. Okay, so we have quantifiers right here. So 0 or more would be star. So if I did star, it would match all of those. But it would also match 0, okay, which we don't want. We want there to be at least one. We want there to be a first name, okay? So so in this case, I want to go plus. So that's 1 or more, okay? So I'm going to go plus. And then we want to have exactly one space because it's a name. So that's going to be \S, that's a white space character. And then the same thing we just did, \W plus. And then that's the whole thing. We don't want any extra stuff. So I'm going to put a $sign because that ends the string. So the caret symbol, Shift-6 starts the string, and the $sign ends the string. Okay? Anybody lost on that? Okay. You're totally lost?
Well, I'm just wondering, once that caused an error, if somebody entered in the middle name or something?
So, correct. Yeah. So you need to communicate so there's two things you need to have, right? So you want to be able to communicate to the user what's allowed input, and you need to be able to make a regular expression that will match that. So if you want to, do you want to force them to enter a middle name?
I don't
So
want-
okay, so this is one reason why when we see online fields, we normally don't just let people type in a name unless it's like just like a hey, enter your name or your nickname or your display name. If we're doing it for actual like record keeping purposes, it's usually a separate field, right? And this is why,
Okay.
because they're doing error checking. Okay, so that's actually a really good question because some people have middle names, some people have a suffix like junior, some people have a prefix like they want to be doctor, right? So the error checking for that can be tough. Some people want to be middle initial, some people want to have their full middle name, some people want to have a hyphenated name, and that might not fit into these rules. Okay, so you need to write the rules flexible enough, but you want to limit the opportunity for errors. Okay, so that actually was a really good question. Thank you for that. Anybody else? You were still stuck? What do we use it for? Yeah, so what we use it for is, so if we have this regular expression, we can use it in, this wasn't working, this is not a very good demo, but we can use it in JavaScript. So we can do a string search, and there's other string operations we can do to match our input. When we read input in, we can do a match to validate our input. But we can also do it in here in our HTML. Okay, so we can put it in this pattern field. Yeah. Yep. So if I just put this in here, this will validate it. Okay. Well, this will validate it on the front side. This won't keep you from entering it, but it will. This will allow that color change. Okay. So I can.
That's what makes the
So yeah. So this in conjunction with, and I'll show you the. I'll show you the CSS for that because there is a little bit of CSS that has to be added to that to make that work. Okay. So right here. So you have to do placeholder shown valid or placeholder not shown valid. Okay. So it's a little bit it's a sort of complicated looking piece of CSS, but all this is saying is we type something in so the placeholder text is not shown and it's valid, then we turn it green. If it's invalid, we turn it red. Okay, so that's what this does. And the valid and invalid is based on that pattern. So that's all we have to do. We don't have to do any JavaScript. We just have to set that pattern and we set our CSS and magic happens. Now that won't keep the user from entering it. We still have to have some JavaScript to handle that. But this goes a long way. This is quicker. It's built into the browser. And sometimes people will fix their own mistakes then. Okay. So every opportunity you have to validate input, you should try to take. So let's see. Should we break? You guys want to just, you guys still working on travel calculator? We can call it quits, I think, on that. I don't want to bombard you guys too much. I just wanted to get a start on this. Where did my thing go? There it is.